Alright, this is John Kohler with okraw.com to do another exciting episode for you, and what we're going to do today on this episode is have another one of my famous compilation videos where I interview over a dozen of my friends, long-term raw foodists, people on YouTube that's been making videos for a while on topics that are important to me and maybe controversial in raw food. So the topic we'll be talking about today are greens, and it's not these kind of greens, my amazing Swiss chard growing in my awesome Swiss chard growing in my garden. We're going to be talking about not the terrestrial greens, but sea greens, or greens that grow in the sea, aka sea vegetables, or seaweeds. This can be very controversial in some raw food circles. Some people say they're filter feeders and that we should never eat them, and some people think, you know, they're one of the best foods on the entire planet and we should stuff our faces with them. What do a lot of my friends and long-term raw fooders and other popular YouTubers think? Well, in this video, you guys are going to find that out next. So I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video, and then we'll come back at you at the end and I'll share with you guys my opinions on seaweeds in a raw foods diet. All right. Take it away, Megan. Now we're here with Megan Elizabeth. You can learn more about her at meganelizabeth.com or check her out on YouTube at Easy to Be Raw. She's been into raw foods now for the last 6 years. And the question for Megan today is, should I eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
This is a tricky one. I think if you like seaweed and you want to eat it, you should eat it. But I don't think it's necessary on a raw food diet. And especially with what's going on in the oceans, I think it's hard to find a good source because it seems like a lot of it was coming from the coast of Japan. So probably a lot of it is pretty irradiated by now.
So now we're here with Kristina Carillo-Bukram. She's been in fully raw vegan diet for the last 9+ years now, and you can learn more about her at fullyraw.com. Today we're going to ask her some questions. Should I eat seaweed on a raw food diet?
That is a difficult one. I personally haven't eaten that much seaweed. I've had like raw nori maybe like once in the past 9 years.
Wow.
Like literally once. And I haven't found it to be necessary. I know for people who are now getting into the iodine debate saying that seaweed can be beneficial, I think it would be well worth it for you to get checked out and see if you do need it. Sometimes it can be fun to make raw sushi and just to enjoy it. Personally, it's really hard to find like good raw nori or seaweed from where I am in Texas, so I just don't ever get a chance to consume it.
So now we're with Ranzi. She's been into raw foods for nearly 20 years now. You can learn more about her at superhealthychildren.com. The question I have for Karen today is, should I eat seaweed on a raw food diet?
I think seaweed is good, but I think that today, with all of the radiation, that we have to be careful about where we get our seaweed from. So I think we need to look more to the Atlantic. I have to admit, I don't eat as much seaweed as I used to. I do think that they're a good way to get minerals, but we need to be more careful about it.
So now we're with Lou Corona. He's been into raw and living foods now for the last 41 years. It's definitely a long time. You can learn more about Lou at loucorona.com. And the question I have for Lou today is, should I eat seaweed on a raw food diet?
You know, the first mentor, he was Asian, and he was very heavy into sea vegetables, and I really thought he was in the early 30s, he was early 50s. He had dark hair, radiant and healthy and strong and powerful, and he attributed sea vegetables as main part of his his diet, and he ate quite a bit of it. So I learned to acquire a taste for it. At first I didn't like it, but I got acquainted with dulse, nori, kelp. Those were probably my three main ones that I acquired, and I've been doing those for many years, and not as much as he does, but I do use them in dressings and soups, salads, and that kind of thing. And yes, I think that sea vegetables is a good idea, but these days probably better get it over from Maine on that side of the fence, because in Pacific Ocean right now is challenged with the radiation on that, and even heavy metals, chemicals.
So now we're with Dr. Rick Dina. He's been into raw foods for the last 27 years. You can learn more about him at rawfoodeducation.com. Should I eat seaweed on a raw food diet?
Seaweed, excellent topic. I happen to be a big fan of dulse. In fact, John and I used to order 20 pounds at a time and then split the case. And key thing about dulse, though, is you've got to rinse it thoroughly to get, because there's really an excessive amount of salt on there because it comes from the ocean and then they dry it. I'm a fan of sea vegetables. I like them. I don't always eat them regularly because I'm getting plenty of nutrients from regular land fruits and vegetables, if you will. Sea vegetables, particularly kelp like way above dulse and the other sea vegetables, is an excellent source of iodine. And that is one of those key nutrients that some people can be deficient in. Now, some people will claim that when you dry sea vegetables like kelp, there's no iodine left in there. And I actually have clinical case histories of patients who I've worked with who consume kelp and have no other significant source of iodine, and their iodine testing score is excellent. So I highly question whether you lose iodine from dried kelp, for example. So I think that's probably the most key thing from sea vegetables is iodine. They can also have some other good minerals in them. They have to be careful because some species of sea vegetables absorb loads of toxins and then dump them in your body, and you don't want that in your body. So you gotta be cautious about which kinds.
So now we're with Nomi Shannon, also known as the Raw Gourmet. She's been doing raw foods for the last 27 years. This lady is almost 71 now. She looks amazing. You can learn more about her at rawgourmet.com. The question for Nomi today is, should I eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
The answer's coming to me. Sorry. Like Johnny Carson, remember?
Yeah. I watched that.
Yeah, when you were 2. Not necessarily, and not always. A lot of people enjoy seaweed because it is a natural source of iodine. And depending on how much iodine they need, they may want to eat it a couple of times a week or every day. And actually, there's some seaweeds I don't really know. Like, I'm probably the only raw fooder who hasn't really done much with Irish moss. I got 2 big bags of it in the house, and I'm like, I really have to take those down and mess around with it, But I eat so simply at home. I don't even know if there's iodine in them, to tell you the truth. But I remember when I worked at Hippocrates, people were advised, and it's quite a few years ago, they might have changed what they do, to have seaweed like twice a week, and we would have like this yummy kelp or whatever. So I'm actually not a seaweed expert. I'm not as positive about my reply to you on the seaweed as I have been on some of the other questions you've asked me recently. But I would proceed maybe with a small amount of caution and do some considerable research and maybe understand, your needs. There's such a thing as too much iodine, which I think is pretty hard to ascertain. I'm going to say, John, that I'm not completely sure that I know enough about the seaweed question for anyone to actually listen to me.
All right. Fair enough. So now we're with Ronnie, which is half of the Ronnie and Min team. You can learn more about them at ubraw.com. He's been into raw foods for the last 14 years. So the question for Ronnie today is, should I eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
Yeah. Well, I would recommend it, and I'll tell you why. I've tried a lot of different seaweeds, and they appeal to me just from my gut level. From my instincts, when I eat them, I like it, and I get a good feeling from them. I did some research. Of course, my wife makes an incredible seaweed salad, and she makes a lot of different uses of seaweed. We make a chip from wakame seaweed. And because I like the chip so much, and because I like to share it with people, I did as much research as I possibly could. And this is what I found out in the research, and what I tend to believe is that certain seaweeds, especially wakame seaweed, their purpose on Earth is to filter the ocean. That's what seaweed does. Seaweed grows in the ocean, it attracts the poisons, and it cleans up the oceans. And so when you read about this, what the scientists say, again, I can't verify it because I'm not a scientist, but what they say, what I've read, is that the seaweed in your body does the same thing. It attracts pollutants from your body, and it sticks to the seaweed. And then when you go to the bathroom and you eliminate that seaweed, you eliminate those toxins. And my understanding is that even if the seaweed has toxins in it already, they won't enter your body. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a substance in there, kind of like how when you soak flax seeds, they turn into glue. There's a substance in the seaweed that attracts things that are bad, holds on to them, and that's what it does in your body. Plus, there's a whole list of benefits of iron. My also understanding is that the mineral makeup of wakame seaweed is the closest thing that you'll find in the natural world to the mineral makeup of human blood in its natural form. So it might be a supplement in itself. But my opinion is, yeah, put some seaweed into your diet. If not, just eliminate the guesswork. Because if it's something that we need, by taking a small amount of it, you'll be getting it. And by not taking it too much on an everyday basis, you won't run the risk of getting too much. But I think seaweed is a really good product to put in your body.
All right, thank you, Ronnie. So now we're here with Chris Kendall. He's been raw for about a decade now. You can check him out at therawadvantage.com. And the question for Chris today is, should I eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
That's a great question. It's a buzz topic as well. Should you? I don't think I'm one to tell you what you should do. Experiment for yourself. Myself, I include some here and there, although I eat it more for entertainment, if I'm making a special kind of dish, or because I enjoy the flavor. I'm becoming more consciously aware of the potential dangers or the realities around collecting seaweed and stuff like that, and it actually kind of leads me to not really wanting to eat it as much. It's questionably a vegan product, a lot of them, as well as the pollution of the oceans is something else to consider. So making sure if you do choose to source it from the absolute best sources you can, and find out too the collection methods, if they're farming it or if it's wildcrafted, which is going to be probably including more sea life in it if they're like grabbing it right from the ocean itself, right? The other thing is, most people want to eat seaweed because of iodine or other different minerals. Myself, I'd personally just make sure you're getting amazing quality terrestrial plants from really great soil, as John knows a lot about, and being aware where you're getting most of your stuff from. Because if you're getting it from the goiter belt, somewhere where you're getting crappy low iodine produce, is going to be more of an issue. But myself, should you make that call for yourself? Do you need to? I personally don't believe so. If you're really paying attention and you're getting high quality stuff, have amazing food, and you're checking iodine levels, being aware of all that stuff, being conscious, it can also make an alright addition as long as you're making sure that they're good quality sources and not just sucking up the crap from the oceans as they can do.
So now we're with Don Bennett, D.A.S. He's been into a raw foods, fruit-based diet for over 20 years now. He's definitely a wealth of knowledge, and if you want to tap some of that knowledge, you're going to want to check him out at his website, health101.org. Should I eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
Well, seaweed on a raw food diet, it depends. There's two types. There's the seaweeds that manufacturers take and they dry out, and they like dulse and kelp and things like that, and they put in a package. That's going to have some minerals, but if you're trying to eat it to get enough iodine, no, as we discussed in another video, that's not going to do it for you, because when you dry something, the iodine just goes whoosh, and pretty much sublimates it. It's like evaporation. The Japanese eat a goodly amount of seaweed in their diet every day, and they're very healthy. But of course, there's also the need side of things. They don't need as much B12 and iodine because they're just more relaxed and less stressed. So the dried seaweeds, you can put it on there, but if you're depending on it, like I said, for iodine, no. But it can help with other minerals, for sure.
All right, so we're here with Dan McDonald, the Life Regenerator. You want to check him out for sure on YouTube at Life Regenerator. And he's been into raw foods now for the last 14 years, and we're just going to simply ask Dan some questions today. Should you eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
I think seaweed can be looked at as a supplement. If the soil was better, it would be less necessary, but I think that seaweed does have some components in it in a plant form that can be very unique, beneficial for the thyroid, and also very mineral rich. So I'm, just a very moderate consumer of seaweeds, and I go by intuition. Sometimes I'll just get a hankering for dulse. Not as much as I used to, but sometimes I'll just get a hankering for it, and because they're, as you know, the iodine in the soil is generally pretty low, especially in North America. It's just one of those things. Some kelp chicken on a salad once a week can shore things up a bit,
Yeah.
So I think it has a place. I think we should keep our minds open.
Cool. So now we're here with Dr. Samuel Mielcarski. He's been into the raw foods for the last 15 years, and you can learn more about Dr. Sam at drsampt.com. And we're going to ask him a simple question today. Should I eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
Should I eat seaweed on a raw food diet? I think, again, it might depend on where you live or what's available to you. I don't think it's necessary to eat it on a raw food diet, but I can't say I'm totally against it. However, I don't know where you're going to find a lot of clean sources of seaweed in today's world. That's the biggest problem, is contamination with seaweed. So, I don't know how I feel, and I'm kind of neutral. I think, hey, if it calls to you, go ahead and eat it. But just like any food, the food will answer that question for you. Should I eat seaweed? I don't know. Should you? Eat the food and see how you feel. But what I would do with that is just eat seaweed and see how you feel. And don't eat anything else. And then you'll know whether it's making you feel good or not. But if you mix it with a bunch of stuff, you're kind of covering it up and you can't really tell. So I don't necessarily think it's totally necessary. But it is a food. Sea vegetables or something, I don't think are totally should be shunned from the diet either. Again, it comes down to source, quality.
So now we're with Tim Van Orden. He's been into a raw foods diet since 2004, so that's like 10 years at this point. I admire Tim, look up to him a lot. You can learn more about him and his work at runningraw.com or his YouTube channel, Running Raw. Should I eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
Should you eat seaweed? I'm not a big fan of seaweed. I know a lot of people believe in seaweed, but after Fukushima, a lot of the seaweed that you're going to get might be contaminated. There are some spots in Maine where they, offer, Maine coast sea vegetables. They have uncontaminated seaweeds. They're in like a little bay that doesn't get the main current, so there's no pollution there. I think seaweed is great, but I just don't like the taste, so it's not a part of my diet. And I don't have an iodine deficiency. I don't have a sodium deficiency. I'm fine without them. If you like them, great. Just make sure you're getting a clean source. But I don't think they're necessary. And they can also be expensive.
Today we're with Matt Monarch. He's been into a raw foods diet for the last 17 years, and you can learn more about him and his internet online superstore at therawfoodworld.com. The question for Matt today is, should I eat seaweed on a raw foods diet?
Absolutely, because it just tastes really good. But you also get the minerals, I know there's a lot of this whole Fukushima thing, and there's Icelandic seaweed that I like to recommend because it's from the Icelandic Ocean and it's cleaner and things like that.
All right. So now we're with one of the godfathers of the whole living foods movement here in the U.S. He actually wrote a book, Survival in the 21st Century, that's like a classic, and I'm glad to have him on the show. He's pretty hard to get a hold of these days, and he's been doing a raw, enzymatic, live food, vegan diet now for the last 50 years, so he's been doing this stuff a long time. He definitely knows his stuff. If you want to learn more about Viktoras Kulvinskas, you can check him out at viktoras.org. So the next question for Viktoras today is, should I eat seaweed on a raw food diet?
I think everyone should be eating seaweed. It's the most nutrient-dense, rich foods. They're biogenic. Namely, by eating sea vegetables and eating food that contains full spectrum of minerals, what it'll do is it will take your genetic makeup to the optimal DNA configuration. Every reproduction of the cells continues to escalate until it reaches its peak potential. So it empowers you to be able to survive under this toxic environment that is the way of the world of today. Though, like I said, it's changing, and we will be stepping into paradise before we know it. It's just going to be like a flash in our eyes. So sea vegetables are a great source of not only minerals, but also all kind of phytonutrients. And you want to make sure that they're harvesting in areas that are basically on low level of radiation, toxicity, mercury, and all that other, but having your organic sea vegetables as basically the choice. So sea vegetables, I'm very much favorable with aramay, hiziki, wakame, dulse, kelp, all these kind of vegetations, as well as nori. So yes, let's go for it.
Awesome.
And there's an excellent book that you should read, and that is all about minerals, and that is Dr. Maynard Murray, Sea Energy Agriculture. He was one of the pioneers of the importance of full mineral spectrum nutrition in the soil and also getting it to your table, and the impact it has, like I said, on your DNA, resistance to all forms of degenerative diseases.
So what do you guys think of that episode and everybody's opinion on the seaweed products? I think we had a wide range of answers from people saying, oh yeah, you could eat it if you like it, if you're drawn to it, or you should eat it all the time. And a few people said, oh, it could be potentially toxic and all this kind of stuff. What do you think? What do you believe? So now I'm going to go ahead and share with you guys my opinions on this topic. So number one, is seaweed necessary on a raw foods diet? I guess necessary, what does that mean? If we don't have seaweed, will we cease to function or cease to exist? Absolutely not. As you guys saw from my garden, my number one source of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients come from terrestrial vegetables or land vegetables that actually enrich with different rock powders, seaweed powders, and different trace minerals from the sea. So number one, I believe that is the best way to get your minerals from land plants. We evolved on the land. Maybe we evolved from the sea, but we live on the land, and that's where we should get the majority of our nutrition from. That being said, I believe sea vegetables can play a part in a healthy raw foods, plant-based, or even omnivorous diet. They contain nutrients that no other foods on the entire planet have. This is especially important if you're still eating standard conventional or even organic foods from the grocery store that's being produced under, industrial farming with big agro businesses. And even local farmers may not be adding the things that I add to my garden to have high levels of nutrition in my foods. So that's why I like to include seaweeds to make sure that I'm getting all my nutrition. For example, it was mentioned in this video, the iodine. And the seaweeds are rich in iodine. Some may say they may disappear after you dry them, and some people say that they may not. I don't know what the answer is. I don't not want to be short on iodine. And in my opinion, eating some seaweeds is way better than taking some kind of iodine supplement. We always want to strive to get the nutrition we need to survive and, more importantly, thrive from foods instead of supplements and things made out of pharmaceutical factories and all this kind of stuff, right? So seaweed's much more natural. And so what you're seeing here are a range of the seaweeds that I have here in my home, and actually I have more that I actually couldn't fit on the table today to share with you guys. And so much like I encourage you guys to eat a wide diversity of fruits and vegetables, don't just eat bananas and dates all day, eat, asparagus beans, eat asparagus, eat Jerusalem artichokes, eat kale, eat Egyptian spinach, eat malohia, which is also known as Egyptian spinach, eat Janera procambens or longevity spinach, eat some ashitaba, eat some celery root, eat, we want to eat a wide variety because every different plant food, which includes seaweed, which is a sea plant, has a whole host of vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and phytonutrients. And much like all these seaweeds you're seeing here, there's, just like there's lettuce, there's actually sea lettuce. Actually, I don't have it up on the table today. But there's sea lettuce, and there's nori, there's wakame, there's macaboo. There's all different kinds of seaweeds, and each one has its own host of unique properties. Probably for me, the main nutrient in the seaweeds are the trace minerals. This is what is severely lacking in today's modern diets from conventionally and even organically raised industrialized food system, because they are not concerned with putting the trace minerals into the soil, because in some cases they may not affect the quality of the plant that grows. They may not be necessary entirely for the plants, but they're necessary for us. There's a sentiment document from the 1930s that basically stated that, you know, a lot of disease conditions may be caused because of mineral deficiencies and trace mineral deficiencies. And it's a lot easier to, you know, put the trace minerals back into the soil so we could grow healthy plants and we could eat those plants, we could get those trace minerals and we could be healthy, versus, you know, the sick care system that's prevailed today. And so I believe we want to eat more nutrient-dense foods and foods with nutrients that we can't literally get anywhere else unless you're growing it yourself at home. And as such, that's why I have all the different varieties, because each different seaweed will uptake certain levels of minerals more or less. So by eating a balance of these, I'm going to get a wide spectrum of different kinds of trace minerals in a form that my body could absorb and digest. And I just let my body figure this out, right? And here's the thing, like, as much as I have a lot of these seaweeds, I eat very small quantities. My diet does not consist of a seaweed diet. My diet consists of a fruit and vegetable diet with small amounts of seaweeds added in, you know, many nights a week as a supplementary food to just ensure I'm getting nutritional adequacy in my diet. So one of the favorite things I like to use is this stuff right here. It's just in this jar. You guys probably can't see it there. It's a powder. So this is a seaweed powder that has American-grown seaweeds in there. And it's probably about maybe about 8 different seaweeds just dried in the sun and ground up and powdered. So I add this instead of adding salt. Not only does it add some amount of sodium in my meals, but it also adds a whole host of trace minerals. And when you have trace minerals in your food, the food tastes better for you, to you, without adding the salt. And we have trace mineral receptors on our tongue. So even if you're not adding salt, if you want good flavors, add some of these different seaweeds. Now, one of the things is that seaweeds could taste quite fishy. So I want to explain to you guys some of the seaweeds that actually don't taste quite fishy. Like Dr. Rick that I mentioned earlier, this is some of the dulse. This dulse comes from Canada. And this dulse, to me, tastes one of the least fishy. One of the most fishy ones is kelp that you get at your health food store. Like, I barely eat that kind of kelp, like from the health food store. I might eat it sometimes. Actually, I think it might be in this. But other than that, I don't eat it so often. I mean, over on this side, we got some New Zealand wakame. So that's from New Zealand. So if you're concerned about the pollution in the oceans, like some people mentioned in this video, hey, go for some kind of New Zealand or Icelandic wakame like I have here. You know, I'm not a big fan of trusting things from China or Asia too much. So there's also, many different seaweeds that are available from the United States, either from like Maine Coast sea vegetables, or up even further north from Canada, or on the West Coast, so up Sonoma, Mendocino County, or even Oregon. So all the seaweed that you guys are seeing in here, a big bag. I harvested this stuff fresh in Sonoma County, California. I put a link down below to a video that actually harvested this stuff so you guys could learn where to go and how to harvest it yourself too. Now, instead of harvesting it and drying it like I did, because you may lose some iodine, or you may not, depending on who you ask, I encourage you guys to harvest your seaweed fresh and eat it, right? Just like you would go out to your garden and pick lettuce and eat it fresh, right? Harvest the seaweed fresh and use it in your diet raw and fresh without drying it, right? Second best, of course, is drying it, because, as we may lose certain nutrients, there's plenty of other nutrients that are still being preserved in its dried state. So yeah, source it from a place where they've done testing. So, I tend to trust the U.S., Canada. Seaweeds, the West Coast has been testing their seaweeds after the Fukushima incident. Also, something like this stuff. This is the Macaboo Super Sea Vegetable. This is probably my favorite sea vegetable right here. It's this stuff right here. And this is whole Macaboo from Japan. You're like, John, it's from Japan. Are you dumb? Fukushima happened in Japan. Well, Japan, much like the U.S., is a large place. And, this Macaboo is harvested not where the Fukushima is, on a different side of Japan, and they do testing to make sure there's no toxins in this seaweed. I'm probably one of the only people in the United States to have this seaweed because it has very limited distribution, unfortunately. And I like this because this is truly raw seaweed that's sun-dried. Also, to me, this has no fishy flavor. And also, you know, the reason why I like this seaweed, it's rich in fucoidan. It's basically a polysaccharide, and you know, these are just, besides the trace minerals which are important in the seaweed, there's many different polysaccharides, vitamins, and other plant compounds or seaweed compounds that can be quite beneficial to us. You know, this has been implicated, some of the different polysaccharides have been implicated in weight loss, even with anti-disease. So there's studies on, you know, some of the nutrients in seaweed are anti-cancer. And that's why I eat this stuff, right? But once again, in this package here, this is like 1 ounce. I might eat, you know, a 1/4 ounce or to a 1/2 ounce a day of seaweed, of one of these whole ones, and then, you know, maybe a couple, maybe up to a 1/2 or a full tablespoon as I shake this in to my blended salad or soup at night. So I'm really not eating a lot of that stuff. Now the other stuff is, you know, they have this Macaboo, which is a product of Korea, but this looks nothing like this one. So the quality of the seaweed does matter. This one totally says raw, it's full, it tastes good. This stuff kind of just like, I don't know what it looks like, but it's like these little shreds of stuff, and it just doesn't look live and vibrant. Now unfortunately, not all seaweeds are sun-dried. Only some of them are sun-dried. Some of them may be heat tunnel dried and dried at hotter temperatures than a raw food is. You know, at this point in time, I would say, does that really super matter? Well, I would say that I don't recommend you guys eating roasted seaweeds, but as long as you have a dried seaweed, whether that's tunnel dried at maybe hotter heat than you'd like, or sun-dried, I think it is beneficial because some of the main constituents, you know, still hang out even after hotter than raw food drying. Now, I don't recommend roasted because that may, you know, contain further toxins, especially if they're roasting in oil like many of the popular seaweed snacks they're selling these days. That being said, roasted seaweed snacks, they're still better than, you know, vegan Twinkies or Snickers bars or, you know, other fast food, junk food things. So in general, I like the wakame. You know, I eat that the most. I like to soak the wakame. Let's see, it's like maybe the kind in this package right here. This one's from Korea, so I try not to source wakame from China. There have been some studies out that show certain seaweeds from China may contain heavy metal toxicity. And so here's my thoughts on the heavy metal toxicity. Every food may contain toxicity. You know, kale may contain heavy metals. You know, in this day and age where we're living in a time and place where man is concentrating heavy metals and putting that back into the ground, releasing it into the atmosphere, you know, acid rain and chemtrails. You know, this is everywhere, and just to think that, oh, it's seaweed, it's from the ocean, it's more contaminated than land vegetables that are being fertilized with poop, you know, from, you know, factory farms that are being fed GMO corn and soy, that are being fed, that the GMO corn and soy and even conventional corn and soy are being fed with biosolids out of the waste stream, and they're, you know, that may be having excess heavy metals as well as many conventional non-organic fertilizers. They may be putting, you know, heavy metals in the fertilizers in small, minute quantities to get rid of it and disperse it. And so now, you know, your animals, if you're still eating animals, are biologic accumulators, and as are the poop that they put out will also have toxicity. And so when they grow organic vegetables with the, you know, poop from conventionally raised produce that went through the animal, it'll also be toxic. So, you know, just to say that, oh, I'm not eating sea vegetables because it's toxic, well, think about it. The ocean, what is it? It's entirely water, right? One of the sayings that I've heard is, the dose is in the poison. What does that mean, right? Or the poison's in the dose? Like, if you have 100% cyanide and have a little bit, but then you dilute it in like 10 gallons of water, you're not probably going to get poisoned, right? But if you drink it straight, you might get poisoned, and I don't know the exact doses, but you guys get what I'm saying, right? Because the water, because in the water, there's so much water, it would take such a high concentration, you know, of pollutants in there. Now, yes, it's true that some of the seaweeds may, you know, uptake different pollutants in there, and, you know, somebody in this video claimed that, you know, it'll help pull toxins out of you, which is true to an extent. I mean, there's certain seaweeds or algae, for example, chlorella, that has been shown to pull heavy metals out of you. And I believe the seaweeds may also be doing that as well. One of the ones I like a lot is this dried seaweed salad, because it has a wide variety and different kinds of seaweeds. Not only the black ones, but it has some white ones and some red ones in there. That's really cool. Let's see, this one's pretty good. It's a sea tangle, and this is in a refrigerated section. It's mixed sea vegetables, but this stuff, it's packed in salt, so I do like to rinse that quite well, get all the salt out before eating it. One of my favorite ones, I have so many favorite seaweeds, I love them all. This stuff right here, sea spaghetti. This is very hard to find. You're probably going to have to order this online. This stuff is from France, so I believe this is pretty clean, you know, from France. And this is sea spaghetti. It's a Himantalia elongata. So this stuff, if you guys eat kelp noodles, don't eat kelp noodles. That's not real seaweed, man. That's like made with sodium alginate, which is an extract from the seaweed. Does not resemble real seaweed. This stuff is real seaweed. You soak these guys. It does take a long time to soak, maybe 12 hours, 24 hours overnight. And then you have these long seaweed-like or like spaghetti-like strands that have a very neutral flavor. These are one of my favorite seaweeds. I actually haven't eaten this in a while. Of course, we have the dulse. Very good. I mean, all these... Oh, and the nori, of course, for wrapping things up. If you don't have the raw wraps, or the raw wurps, get some nori, wrap things up. This happens to be an organic raw nori. So yeah, the seaweeds, they are definitely a wealth of nutrition. So yeah, source them carefully. And the other thing, you know, is although one or two of these may have high levels of certain, you know, heavy metals, I'm not just eating the well-packed dried seaweed every single day. I want you guys to rotate the foods in your diet, not only the leafy greens, not only the vegetables, not only your fruits, not only the farms where you're getting them from, but also your seaweeds, so you minimize the risk of, you know, an overburden of any one particular heavy metal or other toxin in any food. So for example, if this one does contain heavy metals, because I haven't seen testing data on this, unfortunately a lot of these are not tested. If this one has a lot of heavy metals, I don't eat that every day. I might eat that once every 2 months, and then I'll eat this one, and I'll just keep switching them off, right? And of course, the higher quality ones that I harvested myself, ones from more trusted sources, I generally eat more regularly, like this stuff. This powder stuff, I eat it regularly. It's, you know, comes out of Oregon, wild crafted, you know, from a farmer I trust. And yeah, it's very important. And the other thing is, you can start growing your own seaweeds. When I go to Hawaii, I eat local seaweeds of the area, and it's virtually, I think there's like probably no seaweed that's not edible. Some of them just don't taste as good. So like all sea vegetables are edible to some extent as long as it's a sea vegetable. I do not, if you do harvest your own sea vegetables, don't harvest the stuff that's like washed up on shore. It's really not good. You can harvest that stuff for your garden, add it to your garden. But you want to harvest live seaweed that's still attached to the rocks. But yeah, check the link down below. So that's number one. The heavy metal contamination of the oceans, you know, as long as you rotate, eat different kinds, get trusted sources, maybe not ones from China, I believe it's going to be all right. And as you guys heard, I don't eat a lot of seaweeds, but I do take a little bit here and there. I think it is actually quite beneficial and necessary to thrive, you know, not just survive, but thrive on any diet in this modern age when trace mineral deficiency is at its all-time high. And I think by just solving the trace mineral deficiency in the world, we could get rid of many different health ailments that challenge Americans and people around the world at this time based on my research. I know that I've seen improvements in my life due to trace mineral consumption, whether that's from my garden fresh produce or whether that's from some of the seaweeds. I don't know. And it's like, why do I thrive when other people on raw foods don't? Well, maybe that's because I include the seaweeds in small amounts and I try to include a wide variety of different foods, and I don't just focus on bananas and dates, and I just don't focus on eating only fruits, and I eat lots of vegetables. And to me, the seaweeds are just another vegetable with many different discovered and undiscovered nutrients that may be beneficial. So why sell yourself short? And yeah, try different ones. You know, you may gravitate towards some than others, but even if you gravitate towards some than others, you know, try to rotate the kinds that you're eating, because every different seaweed kind has different minerals, and at different times and stages in your life, you may need, you know, different minerals or different nutrients that seaweed is offering you. And so yeah, I want to encourage you guys to experiment and check out different seaweeds and start including them in your diet to achieve a greater level of health based on, you know, my personal experience and my research. So overall, I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on this topic. What do you guys think about seaweeds? Who do you think gave the best answer in this whole video? Hey, please post your comments and questions down below. I'm looking forward to reading them and responding if I'm able. If you guys enjoyed this format, hey, please give me a thumbs up. I'll be sure to do more compilation formats like this in the future. Also, be sure to click that subscribe button right down below to be notified of my new and upcoming episodes I have coming out about every 5 to 7 days. Also, be sure to share this video with a person that you think it may help, whether they're a vegan, raw vegan, you know, omnivorous. You know, I think the seaweeds are definitely a beneficial food and more people should include them in their diet. They're actually quite inexpensive if you know where to buy them as well. Also, be sure to check my past episodes. My past episodes are a wealth of knowledge. I have over 450 videos on how to achieve, you know, optimal health on a plant-based, fruit and vegetable-centric diet that I've been now living on since 1995, so it's 21 years now. So once again, my name is John Kohler with okraw.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, remember, keep eating your sea vegetables. They're good stuff. Alright, this is John Kohler with okraw.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you. Today we're going to talk about coconuts. No, get your eyes off my girlfriend's coconuts. This is all mine. We're going to talk about my coconuts right in here.